Thank you very much. So with that, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. If I could go ahead and have our committee secretary call the roll, please.
Senator Canizaro.
Here.
Senator Dondero Loop.
Here.
Senator Kiekefer.
I am here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Severs Gansert.
Here.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
And Chair Carlton.
And I am here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. So with that, I believe we can go ahead and begin. Our first budget this morning is 1082 Treasurer Bond Interest and Redemption Fund. I'm not sure who we have. It might be Ms. Hagan or whoever we have in the queue. If we could go ahead and bring them up, please.
Good morning, Chair Carlton.
Treasurer. Long time no see.
I know I wouldn't miss the opportunity to say good morning to everyone. But I am in fact joined by Chief Deputy Tara Hagan. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Zach Conine. I serve as your Nevada State Treasurer. Thanks for allowing us the opportunity to present Bond Account 1082, Budget Account 1082, for the Consolidated Bond Interest and Redemption Fund, the Bond Fund, or BERF, for the 2021-23 biennium. As an overview, the State Treasurer's Office is responsible for issuing debt obligations on behalf of and in the name of the state with certain exceptions. The bond fund was established pursuant to NRS 349 Spot 80 through Spot 140 to receipt the collection of 17-cent property tax revenue dedicated to the payment of the principal and interest on the state's general obligation, or GO, bonds, and to reserve money for future GO bond debt service payments. The governor's recommended budget for this fund includes revenues from property taxes, appropriations from other budget accounts per authorizing statutes, and any interest earnings on the fund. The expenditures include the principal and interest payments on debt and costs associated with issuances, including professional services like bond counsel, disclosure counsel, municipal advisors, and other required services to facilitate issuance, such as paying agents, trustees, arbitrage calculations, rating agency work, etc. We're not requesting any new programs for the bond fund in the governor's budget. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions this committee may have.
Unmute. So committee members, any questions of the treasurer at this moment?
I have a question, Senator Gansert. I can't hit my chat exactly.
That's
right.
quite all right. Please do. Just speak up. That's perfectly fine.
Thank you. So in looking at the state's bonding capacity, we had some previews a little while ago, I guess like a week or two ago. And I think the last bond that we issued was 1.86%. And in looking at the reserves that we have, it looks like we're supposed to keep about 50%, but we're anticipated to have between 98.9 and 100 and roughly 17% over the biennium. Do you think there's room for us to, because interest is so low and money is cheap right now, for us to increase our bond capacity?
Thank you, Senator. Treasurer Conine, for the record. So our primary purpose of the Bond Interest and Redemption Fund is twofold. One, to make sure that we have always the ability to pay the debts that we've obligated the state to, and that's sort of the highest and best. Number two is to use that fund most appropriately in order to keep our credit rating high, which keeps our interest cost low. And as you mentioned, we've got an exceptionally good credit rating, and part of the reason for that is because of the strength of the BERF. Now, we've taken that and been a little more aggressive this year, to your point, looking at our future bonding requirements and also looking at what the market looks like. So we've actually lowered the projections for what we think the cost of issuance is going to be from 6% in the next biennium to 4%. However, still very conservative because we want to make sure we always have the money to pay the debts. So we've been able to actually increase our affordability, which is the amount of debt that we're able to issue because the amount of debt we're able to issue, able to service, by about $100 million compared to the last biennium. That's as far as we're comfortable going, as far as I'm comfortable going, given the current market situation. I think it creates a lot of opportunity, but I don't want to run that one too tight. The downside is much greater than the upside.
Okay, it just seems like the assumptions are extremely conservative. And again, money is so inexpensive right now. If there's anything that we think we needed to get built, that we should be taking the opportunity to do that. Because it does, I mean, interest rates may go up, but it's your assumptions going from 6% to 4% when 4% is actually double what our last bond was. So I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
And Treasurer Conine, for the record, just one other piece to that, if I may, Chair.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So the penalty for us not taking a little bit of bond affordability is that we have to find other creative ways to finance projects like the State Infrastructure Bank, like leveraging private and federal capital. Those are hard. But the penalty for overextending ourselves from a bonding affordability perspective could be devastating. And we've seen what happens to states who aren't able to pay their debt and what it does to their long-term ability to generate capital. I think we've got a pretty good line there, but happy to walk you through kind of the assumptions we made and why we made them. The other thing is it's not just the interest rate we can borrow it at, it's what's going to pay it back. Right. So we need to make sure that property taxes remain constant. We need to make sure that other revenue streams exist. And without full clarity on what's going to happen in the future, again, we prefer to be a little bit more conservative. But happy to walk you through it. There's a big old model.
No, thank you. Thank you for the information. And I think we all agree that we want to make sure that we have enough revenue, and property tax is really pretty flat because even in downturns, property tax gets paid when homes are foreclosed upon and so forth. So I know it's a very stable source. So I agree with you that we need to make sure that we have the revenues to be able to cover any debt that we have. And we also, I think it's just important to recognize that we haven't seen money this inexpensive, maybe ever. I'm not really sure. And so there are opportunities that are before us. And I do appreciate that. It sounds like our debt affordability has gone up about $100 million from last biennium because of the adjustment of the assumptions. So thank you for that.
Okay. Committee members, are there any other questions of the treasurer at this time?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Treasurer, I know when you're breaking apart the 17-cent levy into the GO portion and the open space portion, it's sort of a balancing act. And the portion that's being dedicated to open space this year is shrinking down to, I think, 0.82 cents. Can you just talk a little bit how you balance that out? Do you sort of backdoor into the open space portion after you decide how much GO capacity you want, or how do you get there?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, I'll start here, and if Chief Deputy Tara Hagan wants to add anything to it, I'd ask for the chair's permission on that front. So while we have 2 cents that is allocated potentially to open space projects, it's not carved out specifically, right? So to your point, there's a balancing act between both sides. And what we typically do is work with the governor as he's putting together the budget to try and see what open space projects are functionally right? How much they're going to be able to issue and actually get done within the window. And then assuming that that doesn't exceed the 2 cents, there's your answer. But it's a balancing act, to your point, to try and figure out what can be done effectively and what other projects are on the table.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course.
And thank you, Senator. And I was going to ask along the same lines because I was under the impression the Q1 bonding that we had, and then when we worked on AB 84 last session, that really was the intent for that to be there for those projects. So could you expand upon that a little bit more?
Treasurer Conan, for the record, I'll pass that over to Chief Deputy Tara Hagan, if that's all right, Chair.
Sure, you can phone a friend anytime.
Good morning, committee. Thank you, Treasurer Tara Hagan, Chief Deputy, for the record. As the treasurer indicated, it really is built on the governor's budget. So we look at, obviously, to your point, the Q1, prior Q1, and the debt that is existing on that we need to pay, in addition to now the AB 84. So it's the combination of the $20 million for the AB 84 that's in the governor's recommended budget, plus the Q1 that obviously debt that's on the books that we need to pay. So it is just in conjunction with the governor's budget, and then the math falls out from there.
Okay, I think I'm probably going to have more questions on this at another time, but we have an awful lot to get through today, so I won't go too far into the weeds on this one, but I do have some concerns about how that 2 cents is set aside for outdoor. So we can have further conversations about that. Okay.
Certainly, happy to.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So other questions from other committee members at this time? I'm not seeing anyone. Okay, I think we're good there. I believe we can go ahead and move on to the next budget then, if there's no other additional questions.
Madam Chairwoman?
Yes.
I just had a quick question. I know that we're working to reconcile some discrepancies between Gov's rec with projected ad valorem and the treasurer's debt capacity affordability report and what each has in there. But I was wondering if we could get an idea for the record of, I guess, which way we're leaning. Should we, as a subcommittee, be prepared to see us lean more towards the tax revenue projections and the treasurer's debt capacity ability report, or GovRec? I can't imagine that we're going to end up like a dead center, but I thought it would be helpful to get some direction on where we might trend our thinking towards.
Treasurer Conan, for the record, Assemblywoman, I'm not sure how to answer that. I'll pass it over to Chief Deputy Tara Hagan, and if not, we might have to follow up with you offline.
Yeah, thank you, Treasurer. It was really just a timing issue in terms of the property tax revenue, because obviously the 1082 budget would needed to be submitted to the Governor's Finance Office September 1, but the tax committee had not yet met. So they met into mid to late December, I believe. And so therefore we were able to shore up the affordability and have the property tax consistent with the tax committee for the affordability. But we have had discussions with staff, and we will need to reconcile that property tax to ensure that those are the same.
Thank you. I appreciate you getting that in the record on the timeline, and that's just how we ended up. It was just different decision points at different times. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Appreciate that. So any other questions? Seeing none, hearing none, I believe we can go ahead and move forward to 1562. I believe we have Mr. Patrick for this.
Morning, Chair Carlton, Senator Brooks, members of the committee. I'm Ward Patrick, the administrator for the State Public Works Division. You'll see here today a streamlined presentation to allow for questions and moving on to other matters of the state. First, we'll be going over in brief the vision, mission, and philosophy of the Public Works Division, our organizational chart. The two budgets that we're talking about is budget count 1562 and 1349 today. Then we've got the capital improvement program, and we'll go over quickly fly through some nuts and bolts of how those estimate sheets are put together, some of the big factors there. We'll go over some of the items today that have been part of the budget reductions that happened earlier in the calendar year. And then we'll go through the projects that are actually in the CIP. The State Public Works Division, I want to cut right here to how we conduct ourselves and how that's best stated. It's best stated by our philosophy. We work as a team to build consensus. We take pride in our work and we serve with humility. Moving to our org chart, you'll see 124 authorized positions here. This is in support of the governor's recommendation. There's an E600 item efficiency measure that we'll be discussing a little later, but that's included within this count here on this organization chart. This slide is an image of the newly opened University of Nevada, Reno, William N. Pennington Engineering Building. This project was completed in August 2020. The building was open to students fall semester of that year. This project is fast becoming the flagship of the engineering program at UNR. The building was designed to complement its surroundings. As you can see, red brick and steel capture the architectural vernacular of the campus. Public Works Division is proud to add this structure to our list of projects that not only meet the programmatic needs of the department, but are consistent with our vision that states occupy exemplary facilities. Now to budget account 1562. Quickly, we have 4 enhancement units here. They are the elimination of a project manager and a building inspector, replacements for the computer hardware, replacements and relicensing of software, largely software that's for project management duties, which also includes timekeeping, our time card system, AutoCAD, and other programs, including mechanical design programs. Finally, we have safety equipment. It's pretty self-explanatory, but we'd take any questions on that.
All right, Mr. Patrick.
Now to one.
Mr. Patrick, Mr. Patrick, I think we're gonna do these one by one just to make it easier to try to be as systematic as possible. And we know how passionate you are about public works and these buildings. So, but we want to be able to get as much information from you as we can, but we've got a lot on our plates this morning. So I guess what my question would be on this project manager and building constructor inspector. You know, we had heard from you in pre-session hearings that there was a need for some folks, but yet here we're eliminating a couple. So could you just kind of go over how you came to being able to eliminate these 2 positions, and how will this actually affect your workload? The last thing we want to do is get behind. So if you could expand upon that, please.
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. So initially, we did not anticipate a bond capacity of over 400 million. Now that that has happened, well, there's going to be a governor's amendment to withdraw that E600 item. Go to the next slide. And so the way we got to this conclusion that we're going to need 1 additional project manager, 3 additional building construction inspectors, as well as remove the E600 efficiency enhancement unit is here listed on this slide. So you see here within all these CIP books that you have before you in electronic format, every one of those project spreadsheets has project management inspection dollars, which is supported by effort by the Public Works Division. We have a 75 item checklist that we've determined what type of effort is required on every project. And so in this first line item, you see the 21 CIP, and you'll be able to see here that the 21 CIP necessitates almost 150,000 hours. Now, we recognize that certain projects that are on the books now are being moved forward that aren't quite yet completed. And that would be, the strongest example of that is the Marlette Lake Dam Rehabilitation Project. So we're adding that to the workload coming up to this next biennium. Then finally, there's projects that we will not be able to complete within the biennium. And there's these 3 projects listed here, which we'll go over further when those departments come about. But it's the Washoe County Training Center, Hobart Reservoir Dam for the Department of Administration, and the cemetery expansion for the Department of Veteran Services. Then we get additional work besides the CIP. We have what we call building official projects, meaning when an agency has money and needs to go get a building permit, we need to permit that project, which means plan, check, and inspect it. Finally, we have agency projects. This is where agencies have money and they need both project management support as well as building official support. So this all totals to approximately 152,000 total hours needed for project managers and inspectors for the next biennium. If you turn the slide, please. So here you see that same 152,000 hours. We use approximately 3,000 hours per individual as to how much effort they're able to provide, considering there will be sick time and annual leave. And that equates to an overall need for project managers of 29 and for inspectors, 22 FTEs for the biennium. Our current staffing, approved staffing level is 28 and 19. Therefore, it demonstrates the need of one project manager as well as 3 inspectors. So please pay attention to the asterisk where this considers the E600 is withdrawn. And I hope that answers your question. I would also add that we're planning on, as a question that was provided in the pre-session hearing, we're planning on putting no projects on hold. We're planning on marching through these projects. It is true, however, we have 11 vacancies in the project management area and 6 vacancies in the inspector area. We've been hampered by the whole, there's this COVID thing going on and essential services, only those necessary to complete the work. We've also, as you're aware, have reduced the current CIP work that's on our books by $100 million in general fund and some commensurate bond money and other funding. So with all that concern, we've been working to keep some positions vacant so we would not overhire. Well, now we have a work plan to fill those 11 PM positions and those 6 inspector positions, and are prepared to fulfill these positions here, this additional project manager as well as inspectors.
Okay, so Mr. Patrick, if I could just boil it down. So the major issue that we had listed under E600 is now withdrawn. It's not part of the budget?
Ward Patrick, for the record, that is correct.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. All right, so, okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. So, go ahead and proceed to the next item, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ward Patrick, for the record, I'll be now having Ron Cothran, my Deputy Administrator in charge of Buildings and Grounds, going over budget account 1349.
Cool, thank you.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Ron Cothran. I am the Deputy Administrator for the State Public Works Division, Buildings and Grounds section. Leasing Services negotiates and manages 329 leases on behalf of state agencies. They need a membership to CoStar and LoopNet to obtain current comps and historical data to determine the best real estate market rates. The E230 is a vital tool for the state's negotiating power for commercial real estate. E710 is for computer hardware and software replacements per the EATS replacement schedule. E712 is to replace 6 agency vehicles that meet the requirements in SAM 1316. The proposed E721 dump trailers and snowplows will dramatically improve the productivity and safety of the B&G team. The new plumbing equipment will be used to perform preventative maintenance, and prolong the life expectancy of the plumbing systems. E850 Special Projects Fund minor building remodels and state asset replacements on equipment that is beyond its useful life expectancy. These projects do not meet the CIP threshold. E900 is a transfer of one audiovisual tech from Buildings and Grounds to EATS. I would like to thank you for your time this morning. Ward Patrick will be discussing the Governor's Capital Improvement Program. Next.
Madam Chair, any questions on that budget account?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Patrick. We appreciate that. So I guess one of the major issues is the state-owned rent changes that are being proposed. So if you could walk us through the thought process behind that, how do the reserves play into the state-owned rent? And then I believe there was a small issue with the new DMV building. So if you could just give us a high level on the changes in the state-owned rent, please.
I appreciate that. And Matthew Tuma at ASD may be available also on this, but I would initiate that conversation. Our current rent rates are approximately $1.09 per month per square foot, and we see those going down due to some cuts in the area of our category 14, which is our minor repairs that don't qualify for CIP, as well as moving, as you stated, the reserve into the next biennium, so we can reduce our reserve going in the next biennium, and that helps save rent for the various entities. I would point out that kind of what has happened in the treasurer's presentation, the little bit issue of timing where the DMV in South Reno, another exemplary facility provided to the citizens in Reno, that didn't get on the books to be included within the rent rate as of right now. And so that's an issue that we're coordinating with fiscal staff. But so that is not incorporated in the rent rates right now. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Patrick. So wouldn't it typically, when a building would be open, wouldn't they start paying rent then? Or do we typically wait for the next budget cycle to do that? I thought that would just be an automatic, the building's open, it's generating revenue, it should be paying towards its own rent.
Ward Patrick, for the record, that is exactly correct, Madam Chair. We are receiving rent on the full 54,111 square feet of the new South Reno DMV on Double Diamond Parkway. And so there's just a small glitch in getting that into the budget build.
Okay, so you're actually receiving it, but it didn't quite make it into the right column on the right page to be accounted for.
That is correct, Ward Patrick.
Okay.
Chair Carlton?
Yes.
Matthew Tuma, Administrator for ASD, for the record. Just to add on to that, the DMV moved into their new facility in November of last calendar year. And so they would pay rent for their old facility for the first 4 months of the fiscal year. And then for the remainder of the fiscal year is when we would update the rate and the square footage of what they're paying for the new facility. It's kind of a timing issue on why it didn't make it into the schedule for the next biennium, because they moved in so late in the budget preparation calendar. It's kind of compressed in a normal time frame, and so it didn't make it into the updated rate for the next biennium. That being said, we're working with the GFO to update to make sure that it is in DMV's budget, and then we'll look at sort of the full implications for the rent rate as the legislature decides what deck units and what changes are approved for 1349 to make sure that we move forward with the appropriate rates. To add on to what Administrator Patrick stated earlier, is we're going into the next biennium with a fairly high reserve. So that allows us to drop rent rates by about 10% going into the next biennium. We're constantly monitoring what that level of rent would be to make sure that we also don't have rent shock looking forward into the future.
And thank you very much. That was going to be one of my next questions with these adjustments. I just don't want to see them adjusted to the point where there's going to be a swing back. You know, the elasticity of these rates. We have to be careful. Maybe we overdid last time a little bit, so there's a little bit extra there. And then I know the pandemic probably had some impacts on some of this, but I just don't want to set it so low that you're going to have a huge catch up for next biennium. We want to try to keep it as stable as possible so that we can plan forward. So thank you for putting that on the record. I guess the only other question I would have at this moment would be under the maintenance projects that are in this particular budget account. I'm not going to ask you to go through them all. They all look very reasonable, and I'm sure committee members will follow up with you if they have any particular one, or I'll be happy to open it up to them. But the one that I just wanted to ask a question on was the Campos building in Las Vegas. You have the secure card repairs and upgrades. If there's a security issue, I'm just curious why that's in the second year and not the first year. It's just a little over 44,000. And I'm always concerned about security of the buildings.
Board Patrick, for the record, I would also phone a friend to,
Okay, that's perfectly fine.
thank you.
You only get one of those now. Okay.
For the record, my name is Ron Cochran, Deputy Administrator, Buildings and Grounds. Because of the card access system is still working at this time, we have to do updates to the software. And we also have to make sure that the servers have the adequate capacity for the card access. So this is a time period where this is a planned replacement that's needed for the server and for the software updates. So it is working. It's not a life safety issue at this time. It's not urgent, but it will become urgent, and we are planning to do this in the next couple of years.
Thank you very much. I like it when you say it's not a life safety issue. We heard that too many times 6-8 years ago on some of these maintenance projects. So I appreciate that. Mr. Patrick, if you could just kind of give us a brief thought behind how you prioritize these maintenance projects over the biennium.
Thank you, Ward Patrick. For the record, we went over this in the pre-session hearing. So our board has approved the prioritization system. Largely, it is comes from two sources. One is the condition of the facility. And so our PMs rate these projects 1, 2, or 3, meaning it needs to be done this session, needs to be done the following session, or needs to be done at some later time. Then overlying that is the use of the facilities. And so I would point out that life safety issues and legal issues are a very high priority in the CIP. This is followed by essential facilities such as 24-hour use facilities as prisons and psychiatric hospitals and the like, followed by offices of governance. And so certainly the Sawyer building, the Capitol building, and the like are all considered part of governance and are a high priority. And then the balance of the buildings follow that. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate it. So committee members, other questions? I have not seen anything in chat, but I am not that great on it. So, okay, we're good there. Committee members, any other questions? Hearing none, thank you. I believe we can go ahead and move on to the, my favorite part of the legislature is the capital improvement projects. Love to build stuff.
Thank you, Chair Ward Patrick. For the record, we're going to queue up another slide here. And so this is a photograph of Marlette Lake. And soon to be presenting is Kent Lefevre. He's also an illustrator and a great photographer. And so if you want to see any other photos like this, just ask us to come to another hearing. So last session we had some dialogue on construction inflation and how that came about, and we took that to heart, and we contracted with O'Connor Construction Management, who are known in the state for providing good information on construction inflation estimating. And so our annual inflation rate for construction is based on several sources, as you see here: the market wage rates, employment rates, availability of materials and labor, bid results, which you've heard from Public Works throughout the years, recent project cost estimates, and also O'Connor considered the national, regional, and local construction cost reporting. So the 2021 inflation rates that you'll see in the CIP book on every page in that approximately 200-page book is 5.16% annual rate for the north and 4.1% for the south. And so we boiled down a little bit about how they came to those numbers, but also I'd like to point out that these are cumulative numbers for the 2 years starting when the project managers release their responsibilities to estimate the project. All of our estimates are based on June of 2020 information. That's when those estimates were done. And so this O'Connor report states that the inflation rates would be very low. And this is of course based on projections during the pandemic, that they would be very low in the less than 2% range, but they believe that in the next year, which would be from this June coming up for the following year, would increase in the 6, 7, 8, 9% rate. And taking a cumulative average, you're getting to these rates that we're using in our CIP, about 5% and 4%. Again, that was performed by O'Connor Construction Management Incorporated. We've got a few other slides here, which includes construction contingency, which we've went over this in detail with LCB fiscal. And so we'll just point out that we're using 15% on smaller projects, which you see in these estimates of 10% on larger projects. Then we also do use construction allowances. And we have 4 different types. If there's a remote project, these contractors are likely to be spending money on per diem in these facilities, and so that these costs will go up. Secure facilities, there's always a check-in, check-out time that needs to be taken care of on these projects. And then finally, phase projects, which you'll see the welding lab will go over that a little bit later today. And then occupied facility, working around various clients that are in the buildings, takes a little extra time, and so we've included allowances for these items. So now I'd like to introduce some of the projects that are returning to the CIP due to the budget reductions that occurred largely in SP1, but some of these may have been in the IFC items as well. So here we're going to be talking today a little bit about the UNLV engineering building, the welding lab at Great Basin College, and also Marlette Lecture Hall renovation for WNC here in Carson City. There were a few projects that were removed out of these statewide programs, and we'll be highlighting those as well. So in the roofing program, the Railroad Museum, which has a much needed roof replacement here in Carson City, was removed based on the budget reductions, as well as a number of crack and slurry seal projects for the paving program. So those are the items that are today are affected by the budget reductions earlier in the calendar, earlier in the fiscal year. So now going over what the balance of the projects that we'll be presenting here. So for the Department of Administration, we have the statewide programs. We have the Nevada System of Higher Education today, Tourism and Cultural Affairs representatives are available for all these departments, including motor safety, motor vehicles, and public safety. That being said, I would turn over the statewide programs portion to Kent LaFever. Thank you very much.
And if before we get to statewide programs, Mr. Patrick, I guess, Ms. Howdigi, did you have a question on the projects list?
I just had a quick question. It's my first time on this subcommittee, so it's more for just my knowledge. But with the construction contingency, I know it's 15% for project below 10 million and 10% for those over. If it doesn't get used, does that money get reverted back to the general fund?
Thank you for the question. The money that doesn't get used goes back to the place of origin following statutory spending criteria. The Public Works Division by law is required to spend other money first. So if there's a 50-50 split with the university system, that money would be spent first. Second portion of the money could be general fund, in the past, or general obligation bonds. And so if it was bonds, those bonds would be reallocated if they were unspent, and general funds would go back to the general fund if left unspent.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, Ms. Howdigi. So, Mr. Patrick, I think what I'd like to follow up on is a lot of these are going to be maintenance projects, and we're bonding out maintenance projects. And I believe that was brought up in the pre-session hearing. So there's just some concerns about that. So do you have any more information for us on that? Or I'm just concerned that we're bonding out projects that really aren't 20-year projects.
And I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair Ward Patrick, for the record. I am a little bit hoping that the Treasurer's Office is still online. That's solidly in their lane. I would initiate that conversation with of all these projects that total up to the 491 million that are in the CIP. We've identified approximately 8 million of those that don't meet the criteria for 20-year project. And so there is that. And so the treasurer office, if they're in, they can certainly queue in. But as I understand it, they have the capacity to issue shorter term bonds for those types of projects. And any other more detail on that, I would need to defer to the treasurer's office, and we could get back to you with any further reporting. They're not available.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Do we still have someone from the treasurer's office available? I know this is going to be a much thoroughly thought out process between the treasurer's office and our staff, but do we have anyone from Treasury right now? If not, I'll be sure and follow up, and I'll make sure the committee's aware of what the discussion is, but we do want them to work with our staff on that. If there's $8 million worth that need to be done in a different way, there's a cause and reaction to all these budgets. So I just want to make sure that that gets worked out. Okay, thank you, Mr. Patrick. We appreciate it. Committee members, are there any other questions on?
Madam Chairwoman?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. I did have a question. And so this question is around the construction inflation and kind of looking at the construction inflation projections. So I know last session there was a robust conversation we had on this committee about the 10% and the 7%, and it's lower this time. But I'm wondering, can you put on the record, like the O'Connor Construction Management in their cost inflation study, can you just tell us a little bit more about how, from their study, like how they came to their conclusions? I'm wondering, because I'm looking at the 2013 CIP, so kind of the CIP levels the last time we had a big recession, and those were down to 2%. And in the 2021, while they are low compared to last session at the 10 and the 7, they're relative to the 2017 when people were building more, and the cost of inflation was creeping up. So I guess I'm wondering why these actually aren't lower for 2021.
Thank you for the question regarding inflation. And so I think the question was in response to the prior downfall in the economy, our reaction to it was more significant than it is this time. And so last time, like you said, we had a lower inflation rate. Now we're in the 4 or 5% range, but we have considered the level of detail in breaking that up both north and south. And so we've hired this professional, which I believe is also this group is the basis of why the reduction happened in the last session. So we feel pretty confident in their credentials. So I would point out that we're in the winter is when we do a lot of bidding, because that tends to be when all the contractors are working up their workflow for the next year. And so in our world, we would think there would be many bidders on all projects because times are tough everywhere. And so I approved a bid the other day where there was only one bidder. And so that bidder basically set the price, right? There was no competition for that. Also yesterday, we approved a project where there were only two bidders. Now, various times and in various types of work, we get many bidders on our projects. And fortunately, for some of the bigger projects that we bid almost 2 years ago, we had 3 and 5 subcontractors bidding on every project. So although we've stated that we believe this first year during the pandemic, the inflation is almost non-existent, but coupled with the following year, we anticipate 8 or 9% inflation based on the contracted work. So some of these projects will not be done exactly in that various time frame, and some will have some minor delays. And so we're asking for this inflation rate basically only for those 2 years, the year that is mostly behind us, and this next year coming up, where we're asking for the second year of inflation. So if any of these projects go beyond, we're relying on the inflation rates that we put in these projects to still make the project successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As a quick follow-up, I can't recall, but in the last session, did you folks use O'Connor Construction Management as well last time?
Ward Patrick, for the record, I believe LCB Fiscal contacted them and made the recommendation to reduce the inflation rate in the north from 10 to 7, and that was incorporated in the CIP. And so certainly Public Works Division, we consulted them, but we did not contract with them. This year we contracted with them and relied on them, but still used other sources to kind of weigh that out.
So last time you contracted with them, but then there was also your own internal analysis. And then this time it was completely their work product. I can't remember all the details from last session. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting them right. But so have I got that straight in my head?
Ward Patrick, for the record, we talked with a great number of sources last session to come up with the 10% last year, including O'Connor. We did not contract with them. This session, as a result of LCB Fiscal relying on them for the reduction last session, we contracted with them, but also considered our normal points of reference. And we agreed with O'Connor and used their results.
Okay, Ms. Benitez-Thompson, you good?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I believe I have Assemblyman Roberts next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm new to this committee as well, and I apologize for such a simple question. I should probably know this. But you list, or the table we have, and you discussed earlier, there's, these projects are funded by state funding. And then we have a column on the spreadsheet that goes other funding. And you mentioned bonds as a source for other funding. What are the other sources of funding, just for my own education?
Thank you very much. I first clarify state funding. And so state funding is bonds, basically. So that's that whole category. That's how that has turned out. So now we have the other funding. So the other funding is federal funding. So there's some big projects for the Guard that have some MILCON funding, as well as some of their maintenance funding federal. And some of the federal funding is from Veteran Cemetery Group. There's also the slot tax we'll be talking a little bit about. So that's a deferred maintenance area funding for the Nevada system of higher education. Then there's smaller amounts of money that come from various other grants. State Parks has some opportunity for us to acquire money from a couple federal grants as well. And then Wildlife has funding to support the dam project up near Cave Lake Reservoir. And then there's even smaller amounts that are directly from agencies like Emergency Management is working with us so we can be proactive on any indoor air quality or mold related issues. And so they're pitching $100,000 towards the CIP, and we're catching that to be proactive in keeping healthy state buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the answer, and I apologize to the other senior members for having to go over this, but for me, it helps quite a bit. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No problem, Mr. Roberts. And it's a good refresher for all of us because we only talk about these issues, every couple of years, and it's nice to have everyone on the same page. So anyone who has a question, you're more than welcome to ask. We want everyone to be on the same page. So that's absolutely no problem. So with that, I think, Mr. Patrick, we can go ahead and move on to the part that we like the best.
Thank you, Ward Patrick. For the record, I would turn over the presentation on statewide programs for the Department of Administration to Kent Lefevre, our renowned architect, illustrator, and photographer.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee members. For the record, my name is Kent Lefevre. I serve as the Deputy Administrator for Professional Services of the Division. Under the Department of Administration, statewide programs are administered. This is a list of the statewide programs that will be presented during this hearing. And what I'll do is go through each one of them briefly, and if the committee wishes to discuss any further, we can go into detail. First of all, SO1, which is the statewide roofing, the Railroad Museum roofing replacement project has returned as it was removed by budget reductions. SO1W has been separated from the roofing program for accounting purposes, and that's because it's funded with some wildlife money. SO2 is the ADA program, which will address issues related to accessibility statewide. SO3, the Fire and Life Safety Program, which includes 2 projects that were not funded, but would be completed if funding allows. Only the funded project in this critical replacement of the fire alarm at Ely State Prison. SO4, statewide advanced planning. This is in support of engineering studies and also for the building of the 2023 CIP. SO5, many of the pavement projects are returning as they were removed due to budget reductions. SO6 is the statewide indoor air quality program. And as Ward mentioned, this is a proactive program, including $100,000 from risk management. And SO8 is the statewide energy efficiency program. This project will replace outdated lighting technologies for the high mast lights at 5 state prisons and also replace lighting at the Nevada Youth Training Center in Elko. Last but not least, SO9 is this program that allows the building official to accept fees for non-CIP projects in support of state agencies. And as I mentioned, we'd be happy to discuss any of these in detail, or we could move forward to Nevada System of Higher Education.
No, thank you. I think we do have some questions. There were a couple of items that we'd like to go a little bit further into. If we could go to SO4, please. Just the preparation of the CIP and the funding mechanism. If you could just expand on how specifically it's recommended to be funded with the bonds and how you came up with the appropriate scopes on these projects.
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. This is our 21 SO4 program. Regarding funding, the Treasurer's Office is in a leadership role here, and of course that will be probably a theme throughout this session, is trying to work through that and try for all of us to understand how that's going to happen, that funding source. But so we're told that in their law, there's a section that defines what is operating and what is capital. And so then they'll be using various terms for the various bonds to pay for these items that are listed as all being bonded for the state funding in the CIP. Then how do we determine our scope in various projects? So to go over the CIP process in a quick manner, early on, in fact, even in this calendar year, we're going to be planning for the next CIP, the 23 CIP. So we'll be putting together the guidance that we give our project managers and the guidance that we give the using agencies. And those, our website will be adjusted and it will go live in February, and agencies will apply for these projects in around the 1st of April. Our PMs will be doing due diligence from April through June to develop the scopes of these projects. And that's very astute of you, Madam Chair, that is the key part of these projects. It's not necessarily these small nuts and bolts, but it's establishing what the scope is. And so certainly these applications that come through from the agencies, provide some of the scope and, on some projects, very, very fine detail and others very vague. And our professional staff in all these various areas, architects, engineers that include structural, mechanical, electrical, and civil, go out to these various facilities, and we have construction management individuals that take care of ADA and fire and life safety and roofing and the like, and they go out and scope these projects. And so then we have a process where we in-house jury these projects, verify these projects, the scope makes sense. And so without going into any further detail of our board, as well as the governor's office review of these projects and then final delivery to the legislature, there's a big process that provides the scope on these projects. Thank you for asking that.
And if I could just ask you to elaborate, so for this advanced planning program, you're going to be funding it with general obligation bonds. We typically don't do that. And I'm not sure, I think you glanced upon it in your answer, but it wasn't definite. So could you elaborate on that, please?
The very last tidbit that I could offer without venturing into the treasurer's office lane is that there's some possibility that these would be taxable bonds as opposed to non-taxable general obligation bonds. So without, we need to get back to you on any further commentary with help from the treasurer's office.
Okay, well, I think it's good that we have it on the record. We typically don't do planning with bonds. So I've said it, it's on the record. We'll do some follow-up and we'll work on that, and we'll know that that'll be an issue that'll be further discussed. So we've done our due diligence on that particular item. So Senator Dondero Loop, I believe you might have had some questions about the energy efficiency program.
Yes, ma'am. I was just wondering if the division had any additional facilities beyond the 6 locations recommended in your program that would be candidates for similar upgrades to energy efficiencies.
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. There certainly are many other candidates and many other scope types that could be included. So the scope type that we're using here is high mass lights, which are light emitting diode LED type fixtures, as well as interior for the Nevada Youth Training Center. So that category could apply to many other buildings. I would point out that in the park administration buildings and grounds section, many of the LEDs have been done. Also within the CIP, there are also other projects that could be considered as energy efficiency projects. When we replaced the chiller in the Sawyer building a few years ago, it went to what was known as a frictionless chiller system, and it saved over 30% of the power bill out of the cooling system in the Sawyer building. And so whenever we talk about a project that has this term HVAC in it, in the CIP, those are also going to create energy savings. So a little history is that in the 13 CIP, we had an energy efficiency program, and it was based on some legislative programs with Nevada Energy to do solar photovoltaics. Mm-hmm. In the 15, the governor recommended a very wide and broad group of projects to be completed, and that was declined, and I believe largely because of the proposed funding source, meaning self-funded projects out of the savings. And so this is the first return of the statewide energy efficiency program. And yes, there are many other buildings that could use energy efficiency work and many other types of work. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess, Mr. Patrick, that would lead me to my next question, which would be, do we plan on this statewide energy efficiency program becoming a regular discussion within these budgets?
Ward Patrick, for the record, my definition of planning is that we're preparing in case that comes true. And so, yes, we are planning on that coming to you in the future with the hopes that it will. And that will be determined by decision makers of our board, as well as the governor's office before it gets to the legislature in the future.
Okay, that's a great answer. Something I learned a long time ago about energy is the cheapest energy you can get is the energy you don't have to buy, so that you can generate on your own. So any energy efficiencies and energy that we can save in the long run benefits everyone. So thank you. That's a perfectly appropriate answer. Committee members, are there any other questions on this particular item? Ms. Benita Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just had a quick question, and it's on our statewide ADA programs. So I guess I'm wondering if I could draw from what I know. So having been placed on the interim committee for it was the EATS committee, right? And of course our committee hearings got interrupted by the pandemic. But at that time in the technology world, we could be told that in order for the state to become 100% compliant with the ADA, that we were kind of on a 20-year schedule in terms of rolling over all the state websites and technology to being ADA accessible. In this budget where we talk about the tangible, the building, the hard stuff, can you tell me, do we have something like that that's a similar schedule? Does this $2.5 million, are we there and this is just kind of maintenance to keep us compliant, or is there a bigger schedule of moving towards ensuring all of the buildings are 100% ADA compliant?
Ward Patrick, for the record, we haven't been asked that question at the legislature in a number of years, but one question that had come with that in the past, let's say over 20 years ago, would be, when will we be done? So I appreciate your question. Are we at a maintenance level? And so, the state still has many buildings that have been built before when ADA was even introduced. And so the goal of the ADA program throughout the years is to create accessible routes and program accessibility. And so there's all these various almost scientific rules about how to be ADA compliant. And so, one of the goals 20 years ago is to slowly remove from the inventory these older buildings that would just be so expensive to modify, make these small modifications. And so, this program is certainly not going away. And it's about program accessibility. And when individuals requiring accessibility get hired, or a program moves into a new building, that might necessitate that building to have some of these hard and fast building items to be improved. And so we can't predict that, but we're kind of chipping away at this as the chair stated, a kind of a steady state level as opposed to going highs and lows. And so for many years, we've been working at around a $2 million target to hit the highest profile, highest priority items. We certainly address Department of Justice issues immediately. I believe there's an emergency little funding line item in there to address when new employees come about, or new programs need new accessibility features. And so that's a little bit about the history and where that's going. But thank you for the question. It's certainly not a program that's going away, and we're going to say that we're done. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that, because it seems to be that we put great time and energy when, we have these lawsuits hanging over us like the sword of Damocles, and then we get 10 years away from, commitments we made, and you can see the enthusiasm or the political will to make sure that we're doing stuff drop off. But it sounds like we're staying on track for where we intended to be. We haven't lost the enthusiasm for the priority, and I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Benitez Thompson. Committee members, are there any other questions on any of the specific projects or the other conversations that we've had when it comes to statewide planning or energy efficiency? Seeing none, hearing none, I believe, Mr. Patrick, we can move forward to the Nevada System of Higher Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ward Patrick for the record. Nevada System of Higher Education. Here we see UNLV Academic Research and Engineering Building. This is an artist rendering, so not to be confused. This is artistry here. This is not the actual building, although this is what it will likely look like. This facility is planned to be constructed in the northeast corner of the Maryland Parkway campus of UNLV. You can see here that it's going to be west of Ham Hall, the concert hall, and east of Science and Engineering and Tom Beam Engineering, and will be integral with those other two engineering buildings as part of the engineering school. This project comes with some issues related to coordination in getting utilities to the building to be most effective for the operations of the university. So you see this yellow line here. This is this project is already designed, which we'll go over a little bit later here, but I would point out that this yellow line is a hydronic system. And so there's going to be a pedestrian walkway that's upgraded, and there'll be coordination with the operations of the school in order to get that installed.
Mr. Patrick, if I could stop you, I did not understand what you just said. I got a little bit of a glitch in my computer and it sounded like hydronic system. Is that what you said?
Thank you very much. Yes. So there's some of the excitement that we get to work with daily is our engineering systems. And so in order to heat and cool that building, we've worked with UNLV, and they have a central plant for heating and cooling that we're planning on tying into some of the supply lines over by the White Hall Annex. So see where that yellow line kind of ends by that number 6 there? Mm-hmm. There's a vault there that we're going to tie in our heating and cooling piping. And so that way UNLV won't be maintaining chillers in this new building. They won't be maintaining boilers in this new building. There'll be a bigger central plant for ease of maintenance, and so that creates this need to run this trench line to our proposed new building.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that I understood that.
Thank you. I would also point out in the area of utilities, we've recently learned that there's some unresolved issues in the fiber optics area. And so we'll be diving more deeply in those to enable the schedule to be upheld. And so I think we sent over a schedule on this project of around 18 or 19 months of construction timeframe over to LCB Fiscal. And about the time we hit the release button for that information, we get information from our design team as well as our construction management team that there's some unresolved issues regarding fiber optics. And so that is planned to be worked through in a diligent manner to keep this project on schedule and still within budget. This is not seen as a major budget issue, is seen more of a logistical issue, so we'll extend the time. So the time that we provided to LCB Fiscal, we would like to update that. So with that, I would go into the budget and scope. So here we have a $73,688,689 proposed total budget for the engineering building. That's broken down into two primary areas, the professional services, which is our construction administration that's being conducted by our design engineering group. We also have materials testing as part of making the building safe from a materials perspective. And then the fee for the Public Works Division is in this $3.6 million number. Finally, the estimate for the building as well as contingencies is within the $70,024,457. This project is planned to be funded 50-50, half of the funds coming from University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and the state bond funding, each $36,844,345. This project was initially funded in 2017 as a planning project to be taken to the state where it is right now, where construction documents are complete and the project is shovel ready. This is a 52,000 square foot building. It's a College of Engineering, academic and research building. It's a multi-story facility with laboratories, support facilities, teaching spaces, project collaboration spaces, faculty graduate spaces, and other program support spaces. This includes shaded areas for outside gatherings. That's my presentation on this project. I believe UNLV is available to help us with any other commentary, questions, and justification. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the first thing that I need to ask, because of all the issues that have arisen in previous sessions with projects and partnering with UNLV, is this project will be a public works project, correct?
That is the governor's proposal and for you to decide, but yes.
Okay, well, I think you know which direction I'm leaning. So I guess if you could kind of go a little bit deeper into the funding split on this one.
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. Certainly, the funding split is up to the agencies. You know, as we went over our process to go through these projects, and so that's the agency's proposal to the state. I believe it's also part of the overall commitment that they made early on, and so any agency can request any type of funding proposal that they wish, and this is UNLV's proposed funding split.
Okay. And do we have someone from UNLV available?
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Andrew Klinger, for the record, Chief Financial Officer for the Nevada System of Higher Education. We should have some folks on the line from UNLV, but I can tell the committee and you, Madam Chair, that at a high level, what the plans would be to issue debt for UNLV's share of this. And as you know, we do collect what we call capital improvement fees. And those capital improvement fees would be used to service that debt. UNLV representatives may have more detail for the committee.
I just wanted to give UNLV a chance to hear this is the building that they're asking for. And we have discussed it before, so.
I guess, Madam Chairwoman, while we have a pause, could we put in questions that for responses?
Sure, go ahead. Ms. Benitez Thompson, go ahead.
So on the issuance of bonds with the debt paid by student fees, are those fees already contemplated within kind of the fees that have already are anticipated to be raised at the institution? Or would that be an additional amount to the student fees that we are seeing at, I think they're UNLV specific, right? Each institution's student fees for building buildings is assigned to its own institution, right? If I remember correctly.
Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger, that's correct. So when we collect registration fees, there's a portion, as you know, that goes to the general fund. There's a portion that goes to capital improvement fees. General improvement fees, there's a list of categories, if you will, for those fees. And so the fees that are anticipated to be used for this project are those capital improvement fees that are already being collected.
Okay, I think that's what I wanted to hear, because I think that we are hearing from you folks that it's a 3% increase in those fees. So what I was trying to gauge, just the arithmetic, if this was going to be an additional assessment on top of that 3%, or if that 3% was already had in consideration the specific project.
Yeah, it would be contained within the existing fees. And we had issued bonds in October of 19 for what was originally going to be phase 1 of this project. UNLV repurposed those for a parking structure. And so that debt is being serviced with actually parking revenue, which then freed up what was originally anticipated to be capital improvement fees that will now go back to this project.
Oh, cool. So what amount was freed up? So there's kind of like you already have a chunk sitting there that will be designated to this then.
Yeah, that's correct. The amount that was originally scheduled for the 20 million that was issued in October, that is now being taken care of parking revenue due to these funds being reallocated, I guess, to the parking structure. And I can give you the specific numbers. I don't have the specific numbers in front of me.
It's okay. I was just trying to say, I think I heard you said the 20 million in that bonding capacity that's been freed up. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Would you like me to add a few more comments?
I believe I have Ms. Bach from UNLV.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Jean Bach for the record, and the CFO for UNLV. And as far as the funding, we are prepared to go out for new financing for the UNLV share, and we are already working on taking the steps to prepare for that should the funding be approved by the state legislature. The funding source for the UNLV share of debt service will be covered through the capital improvement fee, similar to what CFO Klinger said. That fee is charged on a per credit hour basis to all students. It is not increasing in the next biennium. The amount of the fee is staying the same, but we are allocating a portion of those fees to pay for the debt service. We had originally planned to pay for debt service in the previous bond issue from capital improvement fees, but we have repurposed those bonds since we were unable to use them in the 2019-21 biennium. We repurposed those bonds for our parking structure, and those revenues are now going to be paid out of parking revenues, and therefore the CIP capital improvement fees have been released and will be used for this financing. I hope that answers the questions, but I'm available if you need further clarification.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I follow the trail here. So the money was freed up. It was used for a parking structure. The parking structure was built, but the fees that are coming in on the parking structure will help cover the parking structure, and the student fees will actually be used for your portion of the bonding on the engineering building.
Madam Chair, Jean Bach for the record, that is correct. The parking structure is just being built and it will be funded through parking revenues. The capital improvement fees, which are charged to the students, are being used for the debt service, will be used for the debt service for the engineering building.
Okay. I had a couple of other members wish to be recognized for some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and go to them. And then if we need to dig any deeper, we can bring up the folks from the actual engineering department to discuss their building. So I believe Senator Kickover, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is the anticipation that you're going to use student fees for the entire $36.8 million share university? Are you going to be doing any fundraising at all for the construction?
Madam Chair, I can answer that question. Senator Kickover through the chair. Again, this is Jean Bach for the record. We have pledged capital improvement fees, a combination of capital improvement fees and donor funds. So to the extent we can use donor funds, that will reduce the amount of capital improvement fees that we need to allocate to the project, which will then free those capital improvement fees up for other capital investments for the campus.
And then I think maybe for Mr. Klinger, I would be interested in seeing, probably for both of our research universities, the the total revenues collected through these capital improvement fees specifically, and then what the schedule is on payment, what is outstanding against those liabilities, and if there are any balances that have been created by these fees being generated. That would be interesting as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger, Chief Financial Officer, we can follow up with that information.
And thank you, Mr. Klinger. If you just share that with the staff person that you've been working with, and we'll make sure that it's incorporated into our documents. I believe I have Senator Severs-Gansert has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Keykeper asked my question, so I'm good. Thank you.
All right, that works out great. So with that,
Madam.
Yes.
Oh, I was unmuted the whole time. Sorry. I guess I just want to make sure that I've got something right in terms of timelines, just so that I make sure I got it right. So we approved the CIP budget. This last time, and then we had to pull it back because of the special session cuts. But when we approved the general fund appropriation, so you guys had already gone out and bonded on a project, and then when we had to pull it back, that's when you made that switch on your own bonding authority for the parking and then at the Board of Regents level changed the payment for that. I just wanted to make sure I got that all right, because I know that was tricky with lots of pieces moving around on the chessboard from July through the fall.
Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger, Chief Financial Officer, Assemblywoman, you got it exactly right. So the legislature in 2019 approved this project. We had a requirement for a match of 20 million. So we issued bonds in October of 2019 for our 20 million. Obviously, the pandemic hit that spring and the state funds were cut. So we then repurposed that 20 million in bonds that we issued in October of 19 for the parking structure on Tropicana. So yeah, I think you have it right.
Okay, so the difference between the cost of the project 2 years ago and the cost of the project now, is that entirely explained by construction inflation, or is it scope?
Originally, as the project was contemplated, and certainly Public Works can jump in on this, what was approved in 2019 was actually a phased approach. So the 40 million total that was approved in 2019 was originally intended to be phase one of this project. The project you're seeing now is the entire project.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from any other committee members on the UNLV engineering building? We've all been aware of this one, and
May I ask one question, Madam Chair?
Senator Dunn-Darrow-Loop.
I would just like you to, and not a big long conversation, but just kind of give us some overview of what the enrollment is for that building and what the growth trend will be when we get to a building. And are we incorporating any students in the engineering design? Are we using their newfound expertise as they go through the university? Thank you.
This is Rama Venkat, for the record, Dean of College of Engineering. Give you some numbers on the enrollment. Right now, the College of Engineering has 28,069 undergraduate students or so, about 300 graduate students. Of the 300 graduate students, 150 of them are master's, about 150 are PhD students. And in terms of the growth, when I took over as dean in 2010, we had 800 students. Today we are close to 2,900 students. So that's like a 70-80% growth. And this has been year on year 5% growth, and we anticipate that growth will continue, especially in the area of computer science, cybersecurity, computer engineering, those areas. And our PhD program 10 years ago was something like 60 students. Now we have 150 students, more than double. And this is not just the head count. I'm also talking about graduation rates. About 10 years ago, we were 180 students graduating BS or BA. This year, we graduated 347 students, pretty close to double. PhD also doubled from 12 students 10 years ago to 28 students this year. And with the PhD students, of course, you fund them with research funds that have grown by more than double in the last 10 years. So everything has doubled over 10 years. In the next 10 years, I expect this trend to grow. And this will definitely help us with the local economic diversification and the workforce development. Actually, if you really look at the areas that the state identified as important for economic diversification, of the 6 areas, 4 are courses and degree programs offered by UNLV Engineering. So this is definitely a worthwhile effort, and I think we've been asking for about years now. Hopefully this time it will come through. And then you asked a question about students being part of this. Our students work in the construction industry as interns, and they get, of course, full employment. 60% of our students stay back, especially in civil and construction. So many of our students are contributing to this project. The company which did the CMAR for this is owned by one of alumni of UNLV Engineering. So there is a lot of our students working on these projects all the time, not directly, but as interns and employees of companies that work with. I hope that answered your question. If you have any other questions, I'm more than happy.
Thank you very much. I know several graduates for many years, and they all sing the praises as they move on that it's a wonderful engineering school. So thank you very much.
Committee members, are there any other questions at this time? Not seeing any. Thank you very much to UNLV and to the Dean of Engineering. We've had this conversation a couple times before. Hopefully this one will come to fruition. Okay. So
thank you.
Fingers crossed. Thank you for being here today. So with that, committee members, I think the next item that we want to go over, I believe, is C12, the welding lab addition and renovation. Mr. Patrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ward Patrick, for the record, this is project number 21 C12, the welding laboratory addition and renovation at Great Basin College in Elko. And so here you see the building right off the edge of the campus, right off the edge of the interstate. So when you drive by there, you see all those red roofs, and we'll move to the next slide that demonstrates that. And so here's a red roof split, but here we are showing a red building next to a white roof. And so this addition is going on to the existing welding lab. There's 2 primary components to this project. One is the complete the design and construction for this first part, which is the 4,500 square foot addition, and then the renovation of the existing lab. And this will be a phased project. This will expand the classrooms and the welding stations, fabrication and storage areas, as well as some utility relocations. The renovation will include the roofing replacement, electrical, lighting, safety upgrades, HVAC, as well as the exhaust system upgrades. So this project, again, was part of the budget reductions. It was funded originally through full design. We've now done approximately 1/3 of that design, which we call schematic design. So we'll need to complete the design and then get into construction on this project. The total budget for this project is $6.3 million, of which professional services is $800,000, and the building with minor copying, et cetera, fees is approximately $5.5 million. And we're available for questions on this item.
Okay, I think the breakdown is very good. It's excellent explanation. I guess my one question would be to make sure that the coordination efforts on this, I mean, when you're doing an addition and a renovation, and you have a program that's in full swing, that's in high demand, how do you balance all those pieces and get the project done?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ward Patrick for the record. And so in our earlier discussions, we talked about phasing and occupied facility allowances. And so we have one of those on this project. So the intent here is that the new facility would be constructed, certainly attaching to existing facilities and in the middle of the campus. So there's a great level of coordination, as you pointed out, with the university, but the intent is to keep the welding portion of this school up and running. And so there's 17 welding stations in the existing building. There's proposed to be an equal number in this new addition. We would first build the new addition, start up those 17 stations, then move into the renovation of the existing. So the intent would be certainly all of them won't come on at once the new portion is built, but there will be a school sustained throughout construction.
So we don't believe there will be any impact to students in reduced capacity in order for them to be able to complete the program.
We don't believe there'll be reduced capacity, correct?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate you putting that on the record. Committee members, any questions on this particular item? Mr. Levitt, did you have a question?
Did, Madam Chair, and it's mainly out of just being new to this committee, but I noticed on the engineering building for the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, the agency portion was a 50-50 split between the state and the agency portion. And it looks like with this welding lab, the split is quite different. It's, 5.7 million to 600,000. How does that work?
Ward Patrick, for the record, thank you for asking the question. We went over our process that goes through initial requests from the using agencies. And part of that is the using agency makes a recommendation as to what the match will be, if any. And so certainly the university system probably has somebody that could speak to this as well. But historically speaking, the colleges have smaller fees and lesser capital fees, if any, in their fees. And so this $600,000 is something that has been promised from the Great Basin College, and that's what was been as part of the project from the get-go. And so to my knowledge, back when there were community colleges and now one remaining and still colleges now, there haven't been any that approach the 50% mark. Oftentimes that's a university type of an offering on some of the big awesome buildings that go into the university buildings as opposed to the colleges.
And thank you, Mr. Patrick. Do we have someone from Great Basin College available?
Yes, Madam Chair. For the record, Sonia Seibert, Vice President for Business Affairs.
Good morning. If you could answer the question for Mr. Levitt, please.
Yes, so for Great Basin College, our enrollments are much less than the universities in total number of students, plus our fees are smaller per registration, per credit hour for the registration fees. So therefore we have a smaller amounts going into our capital improvement fee bucket each year. We generate about $300,000 a year in capital improvement fees. So therefore our match, so that we were not issuing debt and other things and could still continue some of our other deferred maintenance projects, we put forward a smaller match.
Thank you very much. Mr. Levitt, did you have?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my question in this, and I was going to save it for the end when we went through all the projects, but I can ask this portion of it now if you would indulge me. So when you're choosing, when I'm assuming that these 5 projects were not the only projects that were submitted for review. So when you're looking at what projects are going to be chosen, is the ability to match a criteria Or is that considered at all, or in that selection process?
Mr. Patrick?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. For the university system, our board is utilizing the Board of Regents priorities. And so, but for other entities, that's a strong consideration. So when there's a National Guard project that has 75% matching funding, that has a high level of consideration. But for the university system, the State Public Works Board, who makes a recommendation to the governor, has throughout time followed the Board of Regents recommendations.
Mr. Levitt, another question?
So is that a no?
So in the university system, no, Public Works does not consider so thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just to be clear, the decision on what comes forward from the system of higher education lies with the regents moving their projects forward. Okay. So with that, any other questions from any other committee members on the welding lab? Good jobs. So happy to see it. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next project, C13. The Marlette Lecture Hall. I believe we've had conversations about this one before. So Mr. Patrick?
Yes, Ward Patrick, for the record, this is 21-C13, the renovation of Marlette Lecture Hall for the Western Nevada College. This is back here in Carson City. And so here you see WNC as well as the Silverado Golf Course and the interstate coming down Duck Hill, or also known as Carson Hill. And then this is a part of the Cedar Building, which is a Public Works constructed building approximately 20 years ago. So this is a renovation just in that auditorium area. And so this project was funded as a planning project through full design, and the budget reductions affected this, and it was reduced to through schematic only, this 30% completion of design. So this project will complete the design and then construction of this renovation. It will configure it from 120 seat tiered auditorium style to a fixed seating classroom to a more collaborative 61 seat classroom around tables, basically. So this is a $1.5 million project, which professional services to complete the design and provide construction administration at approximately $200,000. And the construction with contingency is estimated at $1.2 million. With that, we'd be available for any questions.
I have no questions. It's pretty self-explanatory, and we've talked about this one before. So committee members, does anyone have any questions on this particular item? Not seeing any. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Patrick, on that one. So I believe the next item is 21M06, which is the deferred maintenance projects. And this is where we get into the heck-check discussion. So for the new members, and to refresh my memory and to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I know this is going to come up, if you would give us the tutorial on heck-check so that the committee all knows where we're coming from, and then we can have conversations about what these projects actually are. Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick.
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. First, HEC stands for Higher Education Capital Construction, and SHEC stands for Special Higher Education and Capital Construction. And so this has evolved from a system that was statutory and funded largely through slot taxes. And slot taxes have been decreasing throughout the last decade, and now it becomes more of less legally driven and more of a traditionally driven deferred maintenance program. So this program has been $15 million in the CIP for at least the last 20 years. And originally there was a $5 million slot tax investment and a $10 million bonding investment that the committee would see. The Governor's Finance Office has produced a projection of the slot tax available for this program, and that came up to be $1 million this budget build cycle. And so that left the remaining balance to be paid for out of the state funds of $14 million. The university system has a complex system and a grading system for the various projects that are planned to be included in this, and there's a distribution formula they use to go through the various campuses. And with that, I would be available for any questions and look for support from the system. Thanks.
We'll be happy to phone a friend for you, Mr. Patrick, when we need to. But I think it's important that the committee understand that this has been a $15 million ask every single time. And then we do get a list of projects. Mr. Patrick, when we do this $15 million and we see these lists of projects, do we get follow-up information on what was actually funded and what was completed on that?
We certainly do. So this is largely a pass-through, but we do provide some review of that before paying the bills. And so we receive invoices, and usually those invoices come as lump sum from each institution. And so we review and approve the list of projects as part of that payment process.
And I guess my concern has always been that it's just been a standard blanket amount that we have supported, whether the projects got up to that level or not. We don't see, as we saw earlier in our previous documents, the explanations on the different maintenance items that needed to be taken care of through energy efficiency or through ADA or roofing. We just see a general list and an assumed $15 million to be going towards it, not knowing really where it is. So those are some of my concerns on this. Just wanted to make the committee aware of how this goes. Senator Kekeffer, did you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are a couple. There seems to be a difference between, or a discrepancy between the projects that are going to be funded by this, between the governor's office budget, or between the governor's proposed budget and what's going to come forward from NC. Are we on the same page with what the projects are at this point?
I would look to phone a friend on that one with Mr. Klinger. I know we've requested the list of projects and provided a list from the system to LCB Fiscal within the last few weeks. And that's what we do know here at Public Works.
Yeah, Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger, Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Patrick is correct. We did supply a list of 43 projects spread across all of the institutions that comes up to $14.8 million in projects. We obviously have many more projects than that, but that is the list that we supplied for specifically for these funds to the State Public Works Board and your staff.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I'll cross-reference those lists. So, we just heard about, one new big building in recent years. Over the past decade, we've added a lot of square footage to our campuses, but this allocation for maintenance funding from the state remains, or deferred maintenance from the state remains fairly flat, totally flat. How much funding does the system put into maintenance of its facilities? And then do you have a total deferred maintenance list, and what is the value of all of those projects?
Madam Chair, for the record, Andrew Klinger, Chief Financial Officer. So the campuses, and I know UNLV is just completing a complete building assessment on their campus. Now, not all of the campuses have done a complete assessment, but what we did over the summer is we did identify what we thought were critical deferred maintenance projects and put them into basically 5 classes. Class 1 being projects that were critical within the next 2 years. Class 2, projects not yet critical, but that would be critical in 2 to 4 years. Long-term maintenance projects, cost-saving projects, and then what were classified as socially responsible projects. All of those projects in total totaled $163 million. The projects that would fall into the priority 1 or the critical projects in the next 2 years totaled $67.5 million. And as we talked about on the other projects, what the campuses have to utilize is they have to utilize a portion of their capital improvement fees and the other fees that they collect to make sure that they're doing the maintenance necessary on their facilities.
I appreciate that. When that analysis is complete by all the campuses, if you could forward that on to our staff, I'd love to see it. Thank you.
Happy to do that.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I'll go to Senator Ratty next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, Senator Kekeffer just asked the question I was going to ask, which was just to get a better understanding of the bigger picture of deferred maintenance and how the NSU system was investing outside of these $50 million. So I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All righty. Other members of the committee at this time? Mr. Klinger, you gave a very comprehensive answer. I think you took care of everything there. We look forward to getting that list and being able to go over it and take a good look. So I appreciate you sharing that with the staff. So seeing no other questions on the system of higher education deferred maintenance, I believe, Mr. Patrick, we can move on to the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Mr. Patrick, I apologize. Mr. Levitt, did you have a question for right now? I just saw it pop up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to wait till the end because my question was about all the projects as a whole, and I didn't want to get into it when they were discussing each individual project. And this may be a question for the Board of Regents. My question is I know that there was several projects submitted to the Board of Regents, and kind of a follow-up to my previous question, I wanted to get like an idea of maybe a list of those projects that were submitted, how they were chosen as far as criteria goes, just so I can get an understanding of where the projects fall and how they're chosen, because I know it's not arbitrary. And maybe more specifically, I was a little surprised that Nevada State College was left off that list. Nevada State College being in my district, and I know that they didn't receive any plan air construction funds for their project, and I was just wondering if those projects that weren't on this list here, do those projects just go to the wayside, or are they set aside for future funding? How that works? Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Levitt. Mr. Klinger, if you'd like to just go over that, but Mr. Levitt, we also did a number of projects with Nevada State College in the recent past, so we'll be happy to make sure that you get all that information. But Mr. Klinger, could you go over the process and answer the questions for Mr. Levitt, please?
Sure, Madam Chair. For the record, Andrew Klinger. So, Mr. Levitt, you're correct. We submitted to the State Public Works a list of 18 recommendations, actually, from the Board of Regents. Now, we do produce, just to your question about, how do these projects get selected? We do produce every 2 years a space utilization study that determines, how the campus spaces are being used, and it's broken down into different classification of space. Now that is used by the regions to inform their decision-making process as they go through and select select projects, and those projects are then voted on and selected at a Board of Regents meeting that we then submit to the State Public Works Board. And the Nevada State project, I think that you're referring to, was number 3 on the Regents priority list.
Thank you for that, Mr. Klinger. So any projects that were left off of this initial, do they automatically come back? Do they need to be resubmitted for future projects, or how does that work?
Andrew Klinger, for the record, I mean, typically what will happen is, the Regent submits a list of priority projects. Certain projects get funded, and then we start the process over again and go through the cycle. But what I've seen is that projects that are ranked high on the Regents list typically come back the next biennium and are requested again. I don't want to say that's definite because obviously circumstances change, but typically a project that is ranked high and doesn't get funded does usually end up back on top of the list.
Thank you, Mr. Klinger. Thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging me in just a little bit of ignorance on my part.
No, not, we want everyone to have all the information that they need, and just, Mr. Levitt, so that you're aware, a new education academic building was funded last session, as well as, if I remember correctly, the health and sciences building, a very passionate concern of former Senator Woodhouse, and she was instrumental in making sure that these 2 buildings were on the list, and that we worked very diligently to make sure that they were there. And the health sciences building was used by CSN and by NSC. So those, we tend to try to be fair and spread things out as much as possible and look at what the Regents recommend. So if that address, and I'd be happy to get you any more information that you'd like to have on that, since you're new to the committee. There's a lot of history. Okay.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mr. Levitt. So with that, I believe now we can go ahead and move on to the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs, and time is getting to be a little bit tight. So if we could move as quickly as possible, Mr. Patrick, I know you love this stuff, but we got to get through it all today. Thank you.
Lord Patrick, for the record, I'll turn over these maintenance projects for the Tourism and Cultural Affairs Department to Kent Lefevre, and I point out that we'll go over a summary list of projects, and then if there's any questions, we can go to project-specific slides. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kent Lefevre, for the record. We have 3 Department of Tourism maintenance projects to present. M39 is the HVAC system renovation at the Nevada State Railroad Museum in Carson City, which will replace obsolete equipment. M41 is structural repairs for the historic pit houses at Lost City Museum. And M52 is HVAC renovation at the Nevada Historical Society building. We'd be happy to discuss any of these if the committee wishes to.
And Mr. Lefevre, these are all 100% state general obligation bond funds?
Lord Patrick, for the record, that is correct.
Okay. I don't have any questions. Committee members, any questions of the gentleman? Hearing none, I believe we can go ahead and move on to the Department of Vehicles. This is an advanced planning project for a new facility at the Silverado Ranch location.
Lord Patrick, for the record, as we get our slide deck moved to that location, I would point out that there's one project in here that you traditionally don't see, which is the Adobe project, Pit House and Adobe Pueblo repair at Lost City Museum in Overton. And so I want you to know that for the record, we have no Adobe experts on staff here, but these projects do occur from time to time. So there's Adobe work that's been done at the Fort Churchill State Park in recent years. And of course, the main museum, as well as these facilities that are on this project come up. And so we hire consultant professionals, experts in this work in clay and earthen facilities. And so we have no experts in this area on staff, nor do we intend to hire them. And with that, Kent will present the Department of Motor Vehicles project.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick.
Thank you. Kent Lefebvre for the record. This is project 21P06. It's a planning project, and it's for the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Silverado Ranch facility. And as you can see on the slide, this is located on the southeast corner of Valley View and Silverado Ranch. This project will provide planning and construction documents for a new full-service DMV to be located at this location. The project will provide state-of-the-art facilities for customers in the greater Las Vegas area. The project will have drive-through kiosks, commercial driving courses, and expanded areas for customer service. The budget for this project is as follows. The total budget is $6.3 million, broken out into 6.2 of professional services and miscellaneous dollars, 58,000. This is 100% highway funding. We'd be happy to answer any questions on this project.
Yes, Ms. Howdigy is very excited to ask you some questions, so I will go to Ms. Howdigy.
I'm curious about, sorry, I was on mute. I'm curious about dates. If you could just, I know this is the money committees, but I'm super excited because this is in my district and some of the surrounding areas, because they are newer, haven't had many of these services nearby, like in Sparata, Mountains Edge, and Southern Highlands. So I'm just curious as to planning dates. When do you foresee this project to be get started? When will construction start, and when's the projected end date?
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. We're looking for full design funding here, so we anticipate the design to be completed approximately 2 years from now. Then we would go do bidding immediately thereafter, and so we would start construction likely in the fall of 2023 upon approval of funding. And then the recent project, which was the South Reno DMV, is planned to be very similar to this, which I believe the construction time was around 20 months. So we would anticipate during session of 25, this project would be completed.
And just really quick, how many people do you expect to service out of this facility?
Ward Patrick, for the record, I believe we have Director Butler, our representative from the Department of Motor Vehicles, available.
Hi, everyone. Julie Butler, for the record. Sorry, forgot to turn my video on. Here we go. Julie Butler, for the record. The population to be served would be those from the Henderson office. We see about 1,500 folks a day there, and the individuals that attend or that go to the Donovan office for their services, for their commercial driver's license services. So what we're anticipating doing here is closing the Donovan office and closing the Henderson office as exists today, and then replacing them with this new full-service facility. So it would be primarily the customers that frequent those two offices. I also have Administrator Tanya Laney in here on the line, and she might have actually some better numbers than I can give in terms of the projected customer volumes.
Good morning, Tanya Laney, Administrator of Field Services Division for the Nevada Department of Motor Vehicles for the record. And Madam Vice Chair, did that answer your question or did you need some additional information?
No, I think that pretty much answers my question, but you guys are planning on closing both the Donovan and the Henderson facility?
Julie Butler again for the record. Yes, Assemblywoman Harrigan, we are planning to do that. There are underlying structural problems and access problems with both buildings, the Donovan and the Henderson office. And particularly at the Henderson location, parking is a real problem and it's not able to be expanded. So the new facility would include sufficient parking for the staff and the customers to be able to do their DMV business.
Madam Chair, just one last question.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, but if we open the Silverado Ranch location, that would alleviate some of the traffic to the Henderson location, which maybe we wouldn't need additional parking because people would be taking advantage of the other location. Is it necessary to close that branch down?
Julie Butler again for the record. The issue that we run into with keeping both locations open is one of a different statute that limits us to it puts a cap on the amount of highway funds the department is able to receive. So in order to staff the to keep the existing Henderson building open and then open a new building, we would likely need to increase the percentage of highway funds that the department gets to fund its operations. Currently, we are statutorily limited to 22% of the overall pot of highway funds for the department's operation. If there were a bill to increase that percentage, then we could potentially keep both of those facilities open. But that would have to be something that would be revisited in the 2025 session.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Ms. Howdege. So, Ms. Butler, how old is the Henderson office?
Julie Butler again for the record. The Henderson office was constructed in 1997.
Okay, I didn't think it was that old, but I guess it is. Time flies. And then you said there were structural issues with the Donovan office. I understand what you're trying to do, and I totally get the 22% cap, but you're taking an office that's in the north area of the city and closing it and making everyone go all the way out to Silverado Ranch. And you can't get across town like you used to 20 years ago. So it would be a major trek, especially if you enter the Sahara I-15 time warp of traffic. So what is the issue with the Donovan office?
Julie Butler again for the record. The location is poor. The parking is a problem, and it's hard to get to, and the building is showing its age. The actual storefront needs an overhaul. The break rooms, the training room, the restrooms, they're all old. They're showing their age and are starting to fall in disrepair. And Tanya, again, since you're more familiar and your staff are more boots on the ground, do you want to add some details to that, or maybe Gareth Jones, our facilities manager?
Absolutely. Tanya Laney again for the record, Administrator, Nevada Department of Motor Vehicles. In addition to what Director Butler has already mentioned, the location as far as the Donovan DMV initially upon build was great for truckers because of the location that it is north of Las Vegas. The biggest issue that we have with that property now is it has in time been built industrial neighborhood.
We can no longer hear you, Miss Laney. I think your volume went off.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can. Yes, if you could back up just a bit and we'd be good.
Yes, I apologize for that. Again, Tanya Laney for the record. Since the Donovan the Donovan CDL office has been built, there's industrial businesses that are on both sides of that property. What that has led to is the truckers actually have nowhere to park when they come to the Donovan CDL office. I believe there's a Peterbilt or another similar type property next door that has their trucks parked on the roadway. And then there's, with the other adjacent property, there is no parking on that side. So the truckers, when they have to come to the Donovan CDL office, normally have to find a private vehicle to come in because there's just nowhere for them to park their commercial vehicles. That's one of the biggest issues with that property. One of the other things that we've unfortunately ran into with where the Donovan CDL is located now, right off of the railroad tracks, is that we often in that building are a victim of vandalization. We have had copper stolen from the air conditioning units off the top of that building. We found out that that's a valuable commodity apparently to be recycled. And it's just the area is not suited for the DMV needs any longer. Particularly, the biggest complaint that we do have is the access to the commercial truck drivers that need to get in there.
So that would lead me to my follow-up question. There's going to be truck parking in Silverado Ranch?
Tanya Laney for the record. We have not had a schematic design of that property done yet at this point. That's what this request is for. I can tell you for the Reno facility, we did build that into our design where there's parking and bypass in case for some reason a commercial vehicle did break down on the property so that the trucks can get in and out easily. And then we also have for our training courses, when the truckers come in to do their testing for their CDL, we have parking built in next to those courses for the truckers in case there's another truck on the course when they come in that allows them to wait in that area until they can pull onto the course. Seeing how we were able to do that with our new property in South Reno being built up on all sides of us, I do believe that we would have sufficient room on the new property to do something very similar as what we've done here.
And Donovan is strictly CDL, correct?
Tanya Laney for the record, that is correct, Madam Chair.
That was my recollection.
Oh, I apologize. It is, again, Tanya Laney for the record. It is not just CDL. We also house our motor carrier team is in that same building. I apologize.
Right. I think of them all kind of the same.
Yes.
So, committee members, other questions?
Madam Chair,
Roberts, you had a question?
a quick follow-up. You asked quite a few of them. I was just curious as to were there going to be any personnel savings by consolidating those two offices together?
Thank you for the question, Julie Butler for the record. No, we do not anticipate personnel savings by consolidating. What we intend to do would be move the authorized FTEs from the Donovan facility and the Henderson facility over to the new building once constructed. Similar to what we did with the new office in South Reno, we closed the office on Galletti and we closed the CDL office in Sparks, and we've relocated those staff to the Reno property.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I had a question as well.
Assemblywoman Gorlow, I'm sorry, I did see you and I missed it, went by too quick.
Thank you very much. I just had a quick question. What happens to the buildings once you leave them and go into the Silverado Ranch?
Julie Butler for the record. That would be something we would have to discuss with State Public Works and Leasing Services and Buildings and Grounds. I can tell you for the most recent building move that we did in terms of the South Reno DMV, that building actually belonged to the Nevada Department of Transportation, and when DMV vacated that building on Galletti, we turned that building back over to NDOT. So we would discuss then with State Public Works and Leasing Services what would happen to those other buildings at Donovan and Henderson, what would happen there.
Madam Chair, Ward Patrick for the record. Yes, we would look to repurpose those buildings. Certainly that would be a part of, if approved, we would look into that. And so we've had some initial thoughts of the Donovan Express office may work for public safety as some sort of a satellite office. And then, of course, the Henderson DMV is a larger structure, over 20,000 square feet, I think almost 30,000, and that could be repurposed for office space for state agencies under the consideration that it may require some sort of a minor remodel to repurpose for office space. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Howdige would like to be recognized one more time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we're pressed for time, but I appreciate the second round of questions. But I was very excited about this project, but now I'm kind of concerned knowing that all of the semi-truck traffic is going to be directed to the district. Has there been a residential impact study done? Just I've, like with the recent project with the Star exit of 15, that's a lot of semi-traffic that used to use St. Rose now through some residential suburban streets, and it's created a lot of just disturbance. And I've gotten tons of calls from residents in my district regarding that. And so I'm concerned that, again, we're driving more semi-truck traffic through maybe some residential areas. So has there been a residential impact study done?
Ward Patrick, for the record, thank you for the demuting. There has been no residential impact studies. There are studies that are projected to be done, including programming, traffic studies, draining analysis, zoning approvals, what I think falls into that category, and the impact analysis. So that would be a part of this project. They have not been completed to date.
Okay, and has there been given any thought to keeping them separate, like this, I guess, using it just for like commercial vehicles at a different location?
I believe that's to Ms. Butler.
Okay, I wasn't sure who the question was for. Julie Butler again for the record. We have not considered other locations. This is a parcel of property that the state owns. And if that were the will of the legislature, we would have to work that out with State Public Works and see what other land is available. But we do feel like the design at our new South Reno location, it's a beautiful building. It accommodates both commercial and non-commercial customers, and it really is it's nice that it's an all-inclusive one-stop shop for our customer base, and so that's why we proposed it this way.
Madam Chair, Ward Patrick, for the record, I would point out that in the 2011 CIP, there was some evaluation and design completed. So this facility has land available approximately 20 acres, which is a larger piece of land than in South Reno. So certainly the land available will be able to accommodate both of these types of needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I might have to take a field trip to the Reno DMV to check it out.
Julie Butler again for the record. We would be happy to show you our brand new beautiful building. We're quite proud of it and would welcome any of you for a tour at your convenience.
Thank you very much, Ms. Butler. And I think I'm going to take a drive out to the property where you're talking about putting this and get a feel for it myself, just to see. I too have concerns, so we can go from there.
And Madam Chair, if I could, this is Tanya Laney for the record. I could answer a little bit of stats to the South Reno building, if you so would like, as far as traffic with the commercial vehicles.
We don't need to do that right now, thank you. We'll take that up a little bit later. We're running out of time, and we do have one more to get to, and then public comment. But thank you for the offer. I'm sure Ms. Howdige and some others are going to be following up with you and then sharing that with. And we'll work with staff to analyze this a little bit deeper. But we've definitely heard concerns about trucks in neighborhoods. So it's an issue in Southern Nevada that we're all very well aware of. So with that, I believe we can go ahead and wrap this one up and move to our last item, which is 21P04, another advanced planning project for the headquarters building in Carson City for DPS.
Weaver for the record. I'd like to present project 21P04, advanced planning for the headquarters building of Department of Public Safety. This slide shows the location in Carson City of that facility. This project will be designed with conceptual design for the Department of Public Safety headquarters. This will be a consolidation facility and provide a state forensics testing laboratory. This project will advance site studies, programming, and site design. And it's important to note that this project is not full design or what we call schematic design or design development or even construction documents. Full design will be requested in the 23 CIP and construction will be requested in the 25 CIP. The budget for this project is $640,384, with the state funding 67% and highway funds covering 33%. And with that, we will take any questions.
So if you could just go over the general timeline that we're looking at, and if you could bring the map up again, I can't quite figure out where it was. So that's the main drag through Carson and I believe.
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. This is where the National Guard was before they moved out onto Edmond. So this is what we call the old armory site. And so you'll see next door there, the circle, which is labeled as the Nevada State Railroad Museum. So yes, it's on the main drag, Carson Street, heading up into kind of the automobile row there out of the Carson City proper.
So Mr. Patrick, with using a former armory site, is there any brownfields issues? I think I'm using the right term, but I'm not sure.
Ward Patrick, for the record, I'm unaware of that term, but certainly when the Guard moved off of this site, it was a maintenance facility, and so there were hydrocarbon issues, and those issues, the Guard's portion of those issues were certainly addressed early on, and so we would need to look into that to verify if there's any other hydrocarbon issues before we enter into this site for construction.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. In a site that had things on it, in a maintenance type facilities, we just want to be careful what we put there in the future and the health of the folks and actually stirring up the ground, what we'll actually be getting into. So appreciate that. Committee members, are there any other questions on this particular building? And this will become the new headquarters, I assume. And how big is this going to be?
Or Patrick, for the record, so the current vision for this project is it will be approximately, I'm on the wrong page here, sorry, back a couple pages. I believe it's 172,000 square feet. Yeah, 172,000 square feet is what we're using for the basis of part of the estimate for the pre-conceptual design. And so this project is likely to need structured parking due to the limited size of the facility.
And you knew my next question. I was going to ask about that.
Thank you. And I would point out that Department of Public Safety is available. And so to segue into any comments from them, I would state that last session, this was a governor recommended project as is, with the exception that the cannabis laboratory facilities have been added. So last session, this project was 156,000 square feet proposal. And with the laboratory addition to this, and keep in mind, it is conceptual design, as Kent stated, there's no level of design, there's no anticipation of a construction project happening next session. And with that, I believe Public Safety has a few comments justifying the project.
Okay, we'll open it up to public safety. Do we have the director or who's available?
I know they had a prior, Ward Patrick for the record, I know they had a prior hearing, a similar time frame, but they were making themselves available for this.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is Curtis Palmer with the Department of Public Safety, and I think the other meeting just concluded, so they may be trying to get in the director and deputy director, that is. But I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. This project is designed, is being presented as conceptual only at this point.
Curtis?
As stated.
Can you hear me? This is George Tagliati, Director of Public Safety.
Please, Director, go ahead.
Thank you. And I apologize. We were over with Senator Dennis this morning, and we just switched back. I also seem to be having, I don't know if you hear any feedback. Okay. Well, I'm not, to be quite frank, I'm not familiar with the prior planning of the headquarters building for the Department of Public Safety. That, I guess, originated during the last administration. But what has developed since, and we've had a little bit of a discussion on this, Madam Chair, is just the thought and the proposal to move forward with a state laboratory. And one thought that if we did have a state forensic laboratory, which also included addressing the issues of the new cannabis industry, the quality control, et cetera, for cannabis, that it might be able to incorporate both projects into one and have a headquarters building as well as a laboratory. We've had a bit of a discussion, and I don't have the records handy, but we do have a little bit of research done on how much the state could recoup by doing the cannabis testing. Right now, all that is outsourced. We also have the Office of Traffic Safety, who was involved in this forensic part of the laboratory, where we've had some studies done through with Amy Davies' Division of Traffic Safety with NHTSA, the federal entity. And there's funding that can be available there. So we thought, well, geez, and maybe in a perfect world, we can put all three projects together and go forward. Knowing the environment we're in right now with limited resources, COVID, et cetera, I think one of the things we wanted to do was make sure that we got the state laboratory idea out there this session, so that we can get folks talking about it and doing our own research to see what the needs are or not. And I think it's clearly the time has come, because we're one of two states that don't have a state laboratory. But now, particularly with the passage of the use of recreational marijuana, we have to again follow up, and there'd be nothing more useful than a state laboratory, because presently they outsource to a number of different places. And I know I read an article in the media here recently that the state has been following some of these laboratories to ensure that we have a standardization, quality control, looking at intensity of the product, but also the purity, et cetera, et cetera. There is a large, in the state of Nevada, there's still a large illegal marijuana effort out there. That is a lot of investigation done by our Division of Investigation. So the industry needs to get some attention. And I think one of the ways to do it is to have this state laboratory. So we want to get a dialogue going. And when that is ever built, that's a conversation for a later date. But it was just the idea that maybe we can incorporate a number of projects, including the headquarters, that maybe be more efficient.
Thank you, Director. I appreciate you getting into the meeting as quickly as you did. At least you didn't have to run up the stairs from the second floor to the third floor. It was just switching Zoom meetings. So there are some silver linings to this process right now. I guess my question is going to come to, I understand wanting to have your headquarters in Carson City. Makes sense, even though a majority of your force is in Southern Nevada. And majority of the dispensaries are in Southern Nevada. So I don't really want to get into it right now, but I think we should, in the future at some time, have a conversation about the size of the building, where it actually needs to be, the public safety building, the newer building that's down south right off of the 215 is a very nice building, the highway patrol building. You've got the Campos building, but if there's a need, I think we need to look at where it best suits a lab strategically for everyone, and then what the actual size of a real headquarters would be. So I appreciate that this is a advanced planning project, not an actual planning project. And there's going to be a lot of time for discussion on those issues.
George Tagliati, for the record, I couldn't agree more. And that's our intention. And it kind of dovetails into this project with the headquarters. I know, I can remember for years the discussion of moving the DPS headquarters out of the DMV building. And there were a bunch of different locations over the years. But again, I'm not familiar with that project at all. But I do know that the state lab is going to be, I believe, something that we do have to address. And location, again, is another area open for debate, where this state lab would be, and what would, again, be most effective and the best place.
Thank you, Director. I appreciate the conversation in the future. I believe Senator Kickheffer has a question, and then committee, we do need to wrap this up. If we could take questions offline if need be. So Senator Kickheffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I'll try to be brief. Director Tagliati, I had thought that when you started talking about a state lab for marijuana testing, that you were referring to testing criminal investigations, things like that. But are you suggesting that the state take over all testing of cannabis for commercial purposes?
That's, again, open for discussion. I have had discussions in coordinating through the governor's office, but also with Tyler Klimas and the folks who are involved in the cannabis industry. And the thought going for a couple of reasons. One, it was just the lab issue, and then also enforcement duties for possible felonies or any infractions of the state law. So in that discussion with Tyler Klimas, we've decided to bring up, or at least chat about, the idea of a state laboratory. I felt that it was necessary because we do, with the growth within the state of Nevada, and the fact that we haven't had, we're one of two states that don't have a state laboratory, that eventually the state should address that and have a laboratory located somewhere where we can take some of the overflow from Washoe County, Clark County, Henderson, wherever. But right now, the primary services for the state come from Washoe and Clark, and then also from the rural areas. So that would be for forensics. Dovetailing again into that is the idea that the Office of Traffic Safety has done some studies, and there is an appetite for us, for the federal government, to get more involved in traffic safety research. Like, for example, most of the cases where we pull somebody up for driving under the influence, that would be so somebody smells alcohol on the driver's breath, they do a test, boom, okay, that's DUI. We don't really get into addictions and comorbidities and the issues we have with prescription drugs and so on and so forth. And I know there's an initiative within the federal government that can offer funding for further research, which again kind of moves into a laboratory where when we test someone, that we're testing to see, what has impaired this driver. Is it simply 2 beers, or are we getting into also there's heroin or who knows what else? So the statistics are for the Office of Traffic Safety and nationwide really haven't been that accurate because of the fact that we don't have that research done. There could be a lot more of that. There could be a lot more research into marijuana as far as cannabis industry. You know, what are the good things, the bad things? That's not my world. I'm not familiar with it. But just the thought in our discussions and brainstorming was we may be about the time that we bring this idea forward, because we're also looking at a headquarters building and whatever, and at least not put it off for another session to get some sort of conversation going, bring it before you folks, for sure. And we start getting people to brainstorm this thing and say, hey, okay, in the future, this is what we think we need to do. And this is what a laboratory could do for us. And, but what we're trying to do right now is just get our foot in the door.
Okay. A lot of discussions to be had. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Senator, and thank you, Director. A lot of food for thought. We'll keep thinking about it, but with the umbrella that we know the position the state is in right now, but we also know that we're one of 2 states that don't have a state lab. So, and that conversation has come up a couple other times. So with that, committee members, I don't believe there are any other questions on this particular item. The last page of your notes is basically the projects that are listed. If you have any questions about those, please reach out to myself or staff. We'll be happy to try to answer any questions for you. And with that, I think our business of the day is actually concluded. Now we will go to public comment. It is 10:38. We'll give folks a minute or so. So we'll come back at about 10:40. So if everyone would just stand at ease for 2 minutes. I apologize to the Senate for running over by a few minutes today, but important discussions. So we'll hold out for a couple minutes and we'll see what public comment we have today. Okay, broadcast services. Do we have anyone on the public comment line this morning?
Hello, Chair. This is Michael from Broadcast. Yes, we do have one caller.
Please proceed.
Okay. Caller with the last 3 digits, 837. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. This is Kent Irvin, Kentervin, with the Nevada Faculty Alliance, the statewide association of NC faculty statewide. We express our support for the UNLV engineering building, the GBC welding lab, and the WNC Marlett Hall project. Of course, there are many other high priority projects that did not make the list this cycle. Regarding Senator Loop's question about student involvement in the building design, I appreciate that. It's great that UNLV student interns and alumni are involved. I'm reminded that 100 years ago, when a graduate student in mining needed new office space, they were sent with a shovel to the basement of the Mackey Mines building. And that space, after 100 years, is still in use and part of the Keck Museum, which is worth a visit. Thank you very much.
Are there any other callers in the queue?
Chair, there are no other callers at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcast Services, again, for all of your hard work in helping us manage these meetings and have a successful morning. So with that, committee members, thank you all very much. We are adjourned. Have a great day.